welcome to What the Hype, and bust out the pitchforks because this week we are celebrating Banned Books Week, which is held in the last week of September. Laura, Eric, and Pam are joining me this week. Hey, you three.
Hey.
Hi.
Listeners, don't ban us, though. In fact, follow us. Follow us in your favorite podcast app and social media apps by searching for What the Hype, and visit whatthehypepodcast.com for more about the show and to find a full list of social media links. Also, full video episodes are available on YouTube. We are at What the Hype Podcast. Just go ahead and search What the Hype Podcast. We will come up. And we would appreciate if you left a comment on today's discussion or any other discussion, and also hit that like button. Do all the YouTube things the YouTubers tell us to do. Now,
Andrew, I'm so glad you're plugging our YouTube and the fact that we are on YouTube now with every episode, because I can actually show you guys the banned book I want to talk about. It's The Carpenters, and this is by Mike Sidoni Lennox and Chris May, one of my favorite bands to talk about Banned Books Month.
it is really a banned book.
It's a banned book. It's about the Carpenters, the band.
Oh, Eric, get out of here.
That took way too long. That took long.
There are so many. I've got quite a few banned books in me.
This is my favorite banned book.
There are so many banned ED books that I thought maybe that was one of, the thousands.
Wait a minute, so banned. Hang on, did I prepare the wrong subject matter
I'm
here?
afraid you did, Eric.
Last week we're talking about banned movies, right? And now we're talking about
biopics.
Banned books.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
So to get us started on this discussion of BANNED books, which is sometimes referred to as either Banned Books Week or Banned Books Month, this celebration of banned books started in 1982 by the American Library Association, with the purpose being to raise awareness about the threats to free expression and the suppression of certain ideas through the banning or challenging of books. And preceding the launch of this, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was an increase in challenges to books in schools and libraries over things like sexual content, language, political viewpoints, and religious viewpoints. And some of the earliest challenged books included Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
This is interesting because these are all books I read as part of high school curriculum. So it's fascinating.
Depending on where the hammer fell. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just interesting that they were banned, and then some school curriculum made a concerted effort to embrace them. So
yeah. And we were just talking before starting the show that often the most popular books are the banned ones because they get the most attention, and then people object to them because they are noticing them. But let's discuss what we fear most about books being challenged or banned, because as I'll share in a few minutes, it is an issue that is increasingly spreading across libraries and schools. Personally, I'm mostly concerned about youth who are questioning their own identities and are looking for outside perspectives for help on particular subjects. And there's comfort in reading a book that opens your mind to different perspectives or experiences that you're curious about. And these books can offer people guidance. And the books may be the only source of help that they can access, maybe because it's too hard to talk about a particular subject or come out to people or come out to a counselor. It can also be difficult to go out and see a film to learn about something, or it can be difficult to meet other people like you or who you think might be similar to you.
It's this 100%. Books are your pathway to a wider world than your immediate circle. And so to restrict someone's access to books is to prevent them from seeing what the world, all the amazing diversity that's out there, all the differing opinions other than your own. You can't grow or learn in a tunnel.
Yeah. I would say, obviously there are youth that are disproportionately affected by this, right? And Andrew was talking about identity. I totally agree with that. But I think just kids are curious by nature. I know I had a lot of questions, sometimes questions I was too embarrassed to ask an adult. And I was a library kid. I would go to the library all the time. And, you know, the library was always there. I never like asked the librarian, but like the thing about librarians is that they are just there to help you, not to judge you. And it's an incredible resource. So it's unfortunate too that as a result of some of these books getting banned, librarians are also being affected by pure nature of just being there to help point anyone towards the
Yeah.
knowledge they're seeking.
They
Yeah,
didn't sign up
agreed.
for this backlash.
It honestly, it worries me to see any book banned. And certainly, I think we could all probably think of some works of literature that we don't think very much of, or even some popular bestsellers that we don't particularly like, and we wouldn't
Do I have
necessarily
a list?
would not recommend to anyone. But it's a slippery slope when you go down that route. You mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird at the top of the episode, Andrew, and a really recent example of this is actually that a school district in Biloxi, Mississippi pulled To Kill a Mockingbird off of its shelves in 2017. So not all that long ago. And typically, I mean, you know, I think most people have probably read To Kill a Mockingbird or familiar with it, but you know, it takes place, you know, through the eyes of a white lawyer's young daughter. And that lawyer is representing a Black man who has been falsely accused of raping a white woman. And over the years, it's been challenged and banned due to its strong language, its use of the N word, and discussions of sexuality and rape. But the thing that I found most stunning about this Biloxi, Mississippi decision was their reason that they cited for doing this was that the book just made people uncomfortable.
Wow.
Yeah.
What? Yes, confronting the nation's own history and your demons and the less better angels of our nature is difficult, but so essential.
And it should be.
Well, I was doing
And
some
you
quick
can
Googling. Yeah.
learn a lot from being in an uncomfortable situation. You can grow from that.
Yep.
To Kill a Mockingbird was published in 1960. It was set in 1933. It wasn't until 2022 that lynching was made a federal crime.
Yeah.
Like we're still in that same era. I mean, yeah,
we are not far removed from it. And the fact that the motivations oftentimes behind this book banning is because these stories, you know, these works of nonfiction in some cases make us feel icky. And we don't like that. We don't like to feel icky. We don't want to have to look at ourselves in a mirror. So it's just easier to ban the books, which is funny because it seems like all that does is contribute to those book sales soaring.
Yeah, it just brings attention to it. It's the Barbara Streisand effect. Is that it?
Oh, that would be a case for banning, which I don't know that we want to necessarily get to.
No.
I will say that the real world harm of preventing knowledge is palpable. It's like why when they stopped teaching sex ed in schools. You know, the pregnancy rate shoots up, teen pregnancy, lives are derailed, kids are having to care for children. They have them way too soon. And it's a knowledge issue. It's not morals. It's not anything other than knowledge. And when you ban knowledge, you really put everyone at risk. And it really raises a lot of questions as to what kind of world do you want to see? You may decry, oh, our children are they must be protected from this. But what you're protecting them from is being able to make things like an informed choice. And it's just really wildly backwards that all of these political motivations behind book bannings are so often, it seems, align with these more authoritarian themes of like control. When you're controlling knowledge, you get power that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it stunts people developmentally if they are so sheltered from these ideas that might challenge them, maybe make them a little uncomfortable, so that when they get out in the real world, and they're confronted by some of these concepts for the first time, they never had a safe place to experience that discomfort and really be able to sit in it and learn how to process it in a healthy and constructive way. So it's just bad all around.
I think that, like, especially in communities like that are not super diverse, I grew up in a not super diverse community. I grew up in a predominantly white community. And I worry especially about smaller rural communities like that banning books that are especially diverse, because you're right. Like, at some point, a lot of these kids dream of getting out of that community. And when you have no concept of what life has been like for somebody that does not look like you, it does not breed empathy, which is really what is like necessary to create a better world for everybody. You know, if we don't want to go back, we need to understand each other, and we can't understand each other unless we have the knowledge of what other people that don't look like us have been through.
I want to tattoo all of what you just said on myself because it's so good. But it's
a
true.
Similar point that I was going to bring up was that Harry Potter has been shown to instill empathy in readers. And that's a banned book. I mean, there's so many examples of books out there that will teach people how to develop empathy, or they develop empathy through reading these books, that, you know, they learn about these experiences, these stories, they hear these stories that they never would have otherwise.
Yeah, well, the reason these books are classics is not because they're banned, but it's because they make us look at those difficult areas where we would normally gloss over, making us look at what would cause, you know, a wealthy white woman to falsely accuse a black man of rape. What were the societal factors involved? And it's not a mystery book. You know what's going on there.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy too, because a lot of these social experiments, like, you know, you look at something like Lord of the Flies, which has been banned for like 10 times over, probably, for how violent it is. And, you know, people that would ban it might just say, oh, it's also really unrealistic. Like, there's no way like kids left to their own devices would be this violent. But they've literally done studies where they've left like groups of boys alone and groups of girls alone, and the little boys go crazy, because boys in the real world are not subject to having as much responsibility as girls are. So they don't know what to do with themselves. You know, it's like, so then it's like, it's not far off the mark, you know, to think like something like this, like anything that's like dystopian can be rooted in reality in some way. There's always like a kernel of truth to stereotype.
And these banned books, one reason they're banned is because the stories are so compelling. Like, what are we supposed to do? Encourage authors to write these bland stories that don't push the envelope? A book becoming banned basically just tells me it's a really good story within.
Well, right. It's just like, it has again that kernel of truth. There's something in there, because people know the difference. When you lived something, when you're commenting on something, when you have something to say, when you wrote a book that says something, like, that is going to carry a lot more weight than a book that is bland or played it safe. Real world psychological situations, things like the Stanford prison experiment, you know, are real windows into, I'll say, how messed up we really are, how complex the layers that form power and society and give and take. And for a fantasy novel like Hunger Games to come out and be doing battle royale and these kids fighting to the death, and isn't it bad that society puts them in? Like, yes, but we're doing that all the time in the real world.
Then you have Donald Trump saying that we just need one violent day. And then we'll expunge violence.
I think he's just been watching a Purge marathon, honestly.
Same thing, though. Like, to your point, it's like, oh, let's just let these kids duke it out, and then all crime will stop.
It's just like thinly veiled. All of sci-fi, all of fantasy, thinly veiled reality. Like, and to ban it because it's violent is to miss the point entirely.
Yeah. Have any of us experienced book censorship in our own lives?
No, but I grew up in a liberal bubble, like right near San Francisco. So that's a very fortunate experience to have. I was never, you know, told not to read things, or I never came across a librarian that said, oh, like, we don't have this, but like, you shouldn't even look for it. I read a lot as a kid. I was a pretty like big reader, I guess, like an advanced reader, if you will. So I think my mom was like a little apprehensive when I graduated to like adult fiction, you know, But she never said like, you can't read that. I was just like, well, like the librarian said I could try this out. And so she was like, okay.
Like,
so then after that, it was like no holds barred.
Concerned
she
about
just started me off with like some kind of like mystery. It was like a very like tame mystery novel or something. But after that, it was like no big deal for me to
concerned
go over
about
to the
adult
section.
fiction because of sexy times in the books, or
Probably. I mean, it's not always like sex that's in there. Like sometimes there's like drug use or like violence and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm sure that probably that was the case. My mom has never really been one to like specifically broach subjects with me. She's never really felt like she's had to worry about doing that. So it was more just like, why can't I read this? Like, there's nothing bad. And she was just like, okay. And then she just like, well, like, if it's not for you, that's okay. And then that was it. Like we never talked about it again. So there was never
and you
like
turned out good. So
yeah. I think that like, but like now as an adult, I think that like if I was a parent, I would just be like, and if I had a kid like me, I would just say, you can read this, but like if there's any questions you have about anything, you can come and ask me and I will explain it to you, or we can like learn together. I think that would have probably been the better route to take. But parents aren't perfect. So
the closest I got was my 5th grade teacher, and I've told this story on MuggleCast before, telling us we couldn't read Harry Potter. But I don't think it was because of the witchcraft and it was going to teach us how to create spells and, kill people. But I think she just didn't like how popular the series was getting. And it was so stupid. And my mom objected to her, as I think other parents did too.
Good.
So that didn't last long. But yeah, I think that's the closest I got to running into a banned book or a book being banned, at least in the classroom.
Was it like you couldn't read it for school credit? Because I know that like when we used to have to do like book reports, they would like force you to do like one from every category. So it was like you can't read 4 Harry Potter books, but you can read it for the contemporary fiction.
I don't know. It was so long ago. It was only the second Harry Potter book that was out at the time. So it's not like I could just read Harry Potter all year, get through 4 books. Harry Potter books.
Those accelerated reader points really add up, though, for those books. But yeah, Pam, like you said, a lot of the books that I now know to have been banned that are like the first American classics, Catcher in the Rye, etc., were read as part of the curriculum. I grew up maybe an hour outside of Philadelphia. I never really thought of my town as being that liberal, but yeah, we studied that sort of things. And granted, there's still things in Catcher in the Rye that go way over your head, even if you have a informed 9th grade discussion on unreliable narrator and all sorts of other topics that they like to discuss about those books.
Yeah, I never personally experienced book censorship in my own life. I grew up somewhere more conservative, I think, than where the 3 of you grew up. And all of the classics we're talking about here, like To Kill a Mockingbird, Catcher in the Rye, Lord of the Flies, The Giver is another one that I know has been challenged a lot. We read all of those in my school. So I think that there's like more in common that people have on this topic across ideological lines than gets talked about sometimes. With that said, I definitely did see examples of people in my community restricting their children from reading certain things. Harry Potter was like top of the list for a lot of people who thought this way, but my parents are cool. So I was allowed to read whatever I wanted growing up. My mom's philosophy was always, if you're old enough to understand it, then you're old enough to read it. And if you don't understand it, you're probably not going to get through it because you're going to get bored.
I love
and
that.
She was right. I was reading Stephen King as a little girl. I absolutely remember at a young age attempting, I didn't ask to do it. I attempted to read it. And that it was just that book, like it's just a very dense story and it was intimidating. I did not get very far. So, like a decade later, when I went back to actually read it, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm kind of glad I didn't pick up on this as a kid because that story is not super child appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, and things like Munchausen by proxy, as a disorder, and you're like, oh, now I know what was going on with that kid and his mom.
Yeah. Or like, children doing things with each other. That's a thing.
Well, I'm glad
in that
you were
book.
saved from it in your
I haven't read
childhood.
it or seen the movies, so I don't.
It is fantastic. I'm gonna recommend the audiobook for it, read by Steven Weber. Yeah,
but I see how long it is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm touching the
it's
audiobook or the
40-something
physical
hours.
version. Yeah,
it's amazing. You want
that was
you
the
want
thing.
it in your life.
Like, I think I read a chapter of it, and it was just so dense, and the book was so long that I was like, I don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. So I think my mom's philosophy was right.
Yeah, kids police themselves. It's the one of their best qualities. You know what you're ready for.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look at the top 10 most challenged books of 2023. That's the latest data available, and what's been going on in 2024 so far. We'll be right back. So let's look at the latest list available, revealing the 10 most challenged books. So this is from the ALA, and it's the overall data for 2023. And surprise, surprise, many of these are pretty gay. In fact, titles representing LGBTQIA plus and BIPOC people made up 47% of those targeted in censorship attempts. So number one on the list was Gender Queer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. And it looks like Eric has this book.
I've got it right here. This was lovely. What a good impetus to read Genderqueer. Although I say read, it is a comic. It's 250-page sort of graphic novel about the artist's or author's life.
Number two on the list was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Number three was This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Number four, this is actually a very well-known book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Also turned into a movie about 10, 12 years ago. Number five was Flamer by Mike Curato. Number six was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Yeah, I mean, Toni Morrison's works are a pretty regular fixture on banned book lists. Actually, the American Library Association usually has it in their top 10. If not The Bluest Eye, definitely Beloved, another work of hers. So yeah, Toni Morrison is no stranger to book bans.
Number 7 was Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews. Number 8 was Tricks by Ellen Hopkins. Number 9 was Let's Talk About It, The Teen's Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Being a Human by Erica Moen and Matthew Nolan. And number 10 was Sold by Patricia McCormick. And this is a novel that tells the story of a girl from Nepal who is sold into sex slavery in India.
I was asking the question, especially having gone through Genderqueer, what is why would folks want to ban this? Because on its merit, on everything that I read books for, I'm looking for honesty. I'm looking for simple truths told in accessible ways. This is that book. Genderqueer is just matter of fact. It's a journey. It's a process of discovery. And when I think about why somebody would want to ban this, it gets back to the original things we were talking about in this episode about preventing people from discovering their identity. One of the things that Genderqueer does extremely well is it has receipts. This one slide says, I went to the library and I started to find more and more queer books. The spines of the books that are in this art slide are all these other queer books. So this book recommends queer books that people can check out, and that is power. That is severe. These are all the books in one page. These are all the books they don't want you to read.
Well, and to answer your question about why this book and these others are getting challenged is because parents hear about a book like Genderqueer and they don't want their kids reading these books and getting any ideas about themselves. or maybe thinking they're going through a phase. They are afraid and maybe insecure about what is going to happen to their child when they're going to read a book. And one popular counterpoint that's always been brought up is the example usually goes, who cares if Disney puts two gay characters in their movies and they kiss? I, a gay person, watched Jasmine and Aladdin kiss in Aladdin, and I still turned out gay. Like the watching straight people kiss doesn't make you straight, and vice versa.
No, it just denies you of that representation of feeling like you belong. This is where we get to like the more insidious, like hurt and harm. And the main character, the author in Genderqueer talks about that essentially, growing up feeling like you didn't belong.
Well, it's all because they view it as subversive. And it's not just parents. I wanted to say that too. Politicians fearmonger with this all the time. Think about what's his face, senator from Louisiana, who there have been so many viral clips of reading explicit gay sex scenes from YA gay novels. To sort of prove his point about why these books should be banned and why children, teenagers shouldn't be allowed to read them. And it's this old man reading really sexually explicit gay sex scenes. And I'm like, dude, you killed the sex drive of anyone within a 250-mile radius of you. Easy.
Yeah.
I was just going to say
that. I want to hear those words from you.
I need to check this out.
The funniest part about that is that like it's also like it's like fabricated information, because YA always fades to black. There is no sex scenes in YA. So if there's explicit gay sex going on, like you're in adult fiction or erotica territory, right? Like and that's not meant for children. Right.
Yeah.
So
yet nor would children stumble upon it.
Right. Because it's out of their hands unless they're seeking it out. But that's like a different story,
Right. And the thing is, they might, but there's an extent to which that's kind of what kids do. And that's where it's really important for the people in those kids' lives, parents, other family members, friends, parents of their friends, like, be engaged with your child, know what they're consuming, talk to them about it, learn about the things that they're interested in.
Yeah.
These are the best ways to make sure that your child is consuming content that aligns with your value system. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that just because something challenges your point of view that you should say, nope, we don't allow this.
Yeah.
Like, I had to read Atlas Shrugged. Okay. If I had to read Atlas Shrugged, you can read To Kill a Mockingbird.
And you should. You should read To Kill a Mockingbird. It's excellent.
So let's look at some other recent data. Pressure on libraries to remove books has continued to increase, unfortunately. Pressure groups in 2023 focused on public libraries in addition to targeting school libraries. The number of titles targeted for censorship at public libraries increased by 92% over the previous year, accounting for about 46% of all book challenges in 2023. And school libraries saw an 11% increase over 2022 numbers. And I think
parents have too much free time when they can pick up the phone and start making these complaints. You know what I'm saying? Like, why don't they get back to just raising their kids?
That's why you saw an uptick in banned book requests during COVID, because parents literally had too much time on their hands.
And they also go to these town hall meetings and these school board meetings and push to get these banned, and then they film them for TikTok, and then they get attention out of it too. Laura mentioned from government officials. I agree with that, but I think it's government officials, and then people are hearing about what the government officials are saying, and then that trickles down to the parents, because the government officials, as far as I know, in most cases, it's not them who are getting these books actually banned at very local levels. And of course, it's the media too. It's outlets like Fox News who catch wind of a certain book, and then they're feigning outrage over, oh my God, how can this book be in the library? There's sex in here. There's a superhero just wearing underpants, and he saves the day in his underpants. That's outrageous. It's nonsense like that.
Is that the appeal
then
of Captain
trickles down.
Underpants, that he's wearing underpants? I've never read those books.
I used to love Captain Underpants.
Yeah.
That is one of the most banned books of the last 10, 15 years.
I keep seeing it on the list.
The author. Oh, that's fun.
You met the author? Wow, cool.
Yeah, he actually came and met my first grade class and did a reading for us. It was really, really cute.
Was he only wearing underpants?
No, I'm pretty sure that would have gotten him
incarcerated
on the sex registry.
Yeah.
Now that's a problem. No, that's cool. And here's some early data from 2024. Again, this is from the ALA. Between January 1st and August 31st, ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 414 attempts to censor library materials and services. In those cases, 1,128 unique titles were challenged. In the same reporting period last year, ALA tracked 695 attempts with 1,915 unique titles challenged. So actually a bit of a downward trend year over year. Though the number of reports to date has declined in 2024, the number of documented attempts to censor books continues to far exceed the numbers prior to 2020. So it's still a big problem when compared to pre-pandemic. Additionally, instances of soft censorship, where books are purchased but placed in restricted areas, not used in library displays, or otherwise hidden or kept off limits due to fear of challenges, illustrate the impact of organized censorship campaigns on students' and readers' freedom to read. In some circumstances, books have been preemptively excluded from library collections, taken off the shelves before they are banned, or not purchased for library collections in the first place. So there's this whole other issue that doesn't even get documented because it doesn't even really have the chance to. So we'll talk about what to do about this, how you can help raise awareness around what books are being banned. And we'll talk about some of our favorite banned books, but we're going to take one more break and we'll be right back. Eric, what are some of your favorite banned books?
Yeah, I got 3 that I really, really love that are continually at the top of the list, and 2 are very similar, I think, that in certain ways. The Hunger Games, obviously, and Ender's Game. Spoiler alert, not games really, and all to do with war and death and suffering. Some claims say that it's violent and kids shouldn't be exposed to violence, but what I love about this ALA.org list, and also something from CBR.com, suggests that the real issue that the Hunger Games and other books like it get banned is that it relates to censorship of the book's themes, which pertain to political rebellion and challenging authority. So in both the Hunger Games and Ender's Game, you have a society that sends kids to war or to die. And it's normalized. That is what they tell themselves they have to do. And so the horrors that your main character, whether it's Andrew Wiggin or Katniss Everdeen, are put through, are normalized in this crazy, high stakes, oppressive way. But it's not normal. And the book is all about the horrors of all of that and the repercussions of all of that. So yes, the books have violence in them, but you can learn a lot from them and react to them. And I think they're just incredibly instructive. And this third book I decided to single out as the Goosebumps series. And I just had to look this up because I'm like, I read at least 30 of the Goosebumps books, the first 30. And, I had to ask, why is this been banned? Apparently, possibly some frightening occult themes. But then some school officials apparently allege that the books might encourage disrespect for people and property or provoke harmful thoughts or behavior. So if you have
a stretch.
A bully character but usually those characters get their comeuppance. I don't know.
And I mean, how many novels have stories about bullies? Like, just because there's a bully in it doesn't mean the book should get banned.
Well,
or because
and the Goosebumps books, those kids had all this agency because the story is all about what's happening to them and their brother or something. Like, it's great. They're great.
It's like saying Goosebumps has, those stories, those installments about a puppet coming to life. Like by reading this book, your puppet is going to come to life. It's almost like the same implication. I used to love Goosebumps as well. That was such a great series growing up. Yeah. No wonder you love spooky stuff, Laura.
Oh my gosh, yes. Listen, Say Cheese and Die was probably my favorite Goosebumps book.
Oh, mine was Egg Monsters from Mars, I want to say.
Oh yeah. I
don't remember specific titles.
But... Oh, I loved all of the Choose Your Own Adventure ones.
Those were insane.
Oh God, they were so good. They were my favorite.
I also want to shout out, I think it was number 60 something, 62 maybe, The Haunted School. It was really incredible. It was a late entry to like my end of reading it, but it was real good.
And the covers of those books, iconic. Oh,
classic.
They're just seared in my brain.
And they were like embellished, like they're almost 3D. You know, they weren't holographic like the Animorphs books. I wonder if the Animorphs
no, but you could run your finger over Goosebumps and it was embellished. Is that the right word for it? Like,
yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it was cool. Textured, right?
Maybe embossed.
Embossed, textured, something like that. Laura, Pam, how about you?
Yeah, so I already spoke a little bit about To Kill a Mockingbird at the top of the show. We talked about Toni Morrison. But some others that kind of jump out at me are The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Really incredible book about an Afghani man who ends up going back to Afghanistan as an adult after, he left and his childhood best friend was left behind to some really horrible circumstances. So he goes back to try and figure out what happened to his son. It's just an incredible story, but it is also one that just gets banned and is constantly challenged because of themes around violence. War, of course, is a big theme of this book, obviously with it taking place in Afghanistan, during the period of time that the United States was bombing it. And there are also some really difficult themes of sexual abuse and assault that really permeate the story. But it's such an important one. And to be honest with you, it is not told from a child's point of view, which does strike me as curious that this would be a book that would, people would attempt to ban, because this isn't a book that you would find in your grade schooler's curriculum. Like, this is a very adult book.
Wow.
And yet it, has been the target of banning attempts. I think also thinking of other classics that we all probably read in high school, I'm thinking about like Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury, George Orwell with 1984. Also thinking about like Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, like all of these. Yeah, all of these things are being challenged because, again, like we talked about earlier, they lift up a mirror, and those three books, Fahrenheit 451, 1984, and Brave New World, really call into question the societal order and the governmental oversight involved in that. And people don't like that because it makes them question their own ideologies, but it also raises uncomfortable questions about the way we live. And it should.
Yeah. Pam?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. It's like the queen of children's fiction. She published this in the 70s, I think, and it's been getting banned ever since because it explores religion just by proxy of the main character, Margaret, talking to God, even though she grew up non-religious, and also because it deals with puberty and girls getting their periods and growing boobs.
Heaven forbid.
And that makes people uncomfortable.
We know that doesn't happen in real life, right?
Right, exactly. It's an example of but this is like an important, book. It could be a very important book to a lot of young kids, and that's why it gets recommended. That's why it's a classic. And it sucks that it's still like trying to get pulled off of shelves.
Yeah. I mean, to your point too, Pam, the Diary of Anne Frank has often been challenged.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
A significant reason for that is because Anne was exploring her sexuality as a young teenager. Which
and that's just the pages we can read, because a lot of it was censored from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's a good point.
But the other one we studied when we learned about the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel's Night.
Yes.
That has actually had an increase in ban attempts. Like, I'm surprised we got to read it because it continued. But what are they banning? Oh, the truth of what happened at Dachau at the camps.
I haven't read a lot of like less popular banned books, but I think banned books, like I said at the top of this, are inherently popular because the attention gets them banned, because they're getting attention to begin with, and these books are on a lot of people's radars. One book, I was looking on banned books lists from the last few years because I thought for sure this book would be on a banned books list. I read it over the summer. It's called A Little Life. It's a long book. It's just this heartbreaking, traumatic story about 4 friends who grew up together. Some people have described it as trauma porn. Like, everything that could go wrong in someone's life does. And parents would not want their kids reading this. Schools would probably not want this in their libraries. It hasn't been on a banned book list as far as I can tell. Certainly not with like dozens of banned book requests spread out across the country. And I assume the reason for that is it's always been marketed to adults. It is not a book that has been put in school libraries. So I think that is one major difference when we're comparing the books that we've been talking about today versus books like A Little Life. They just haven't had the opportunity to be put in front of kids.
I was going to say, let's circle back to A Little Life in like 20 years, because that's also an example of a book that people are like betting on becoming a modern day classic. You know, like it will be a classic. I think that in maybe 20 years, we will start to see it perhaps on some banned lists.
And it is kind of really gay too, which is another reason why it would be on banned books list.
Andrew, if you survived that, you should read it. You really should check out it.
two completely different storylines.
Talking about an unfathomable evil in this world that you just can't wrap your head around, and kids having to face it.
A group of friends trauma bonding. That's pretty much it.
I enjoyed the pain of A Little Life.
I just thought about this. Did y'all ever realize sometimes that things maybe flew under the radar in your school libraries? Because I remember one time in middle school, I checked out a sci-fi book about aliens. I don't even remember what it was called, but like 20 pages into this book, there was like a pretty, I would call it like medium graphic sex scene between an alien and a person that was very descriptive about the aliens parts. And I'm in like 6th grade reading this. And I was like, I felt like it was a dirty little secret. I was like, oh, I get to read this like dirty stuff. And nobody, like, I just can't imagine that someone in the Forsyth County, Georgia school system read that book and was like, yeah, we'll put that in there. So like, I think about the number of things that probably do fly under the radar because they're not as noteworthy.
Yeah.
So my answer to this is Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews, which my middle school library did have, just the first book. It's a series, and that's one of those books that, for anyone that doesn't know, it deals with it's insane. Like, this mom remarries, and like she doesn't want the new husband to find out about the kids from her old marriage, so she locks them up in the attic. And then like there's like some cases of incest that occur between the two older siblings, and there's like poisoning that it's insane. Anyway, this book was in my middle school library, probably should not have been. And I think that that's one of those classic examples of a book that like one person reads and then it gets passed around like a dirty little secret. Like, you gotta read this book because it should not be here. And oh my gosh, there's sex, but also it's like very taboo sex. I don't think it was actually that graphic from what I remember. But yeah, that was definitely one of those books that got passed around. And I think like that'll be the case for like maybe a few people that are even listening, because that's another example of just a book that's almost a rite of passage.
Yeah.
And most people will read it like way too young, because it really shouldn't be read by, middle school teenagers.
I do wonder if the internet is making it easier for librarians, public officials, etc., to quickly figure out if a book should be banned or not. Unfortunately, there's plenty of misinformation, and everybody's got different opinions online as well about how bad, quote unquote, a book actually is. But you have to think, or at least I think, that less books are flying under the radar because of how easy it is to figure out just how bad it is. So we asked on our social media over on Instagram, listeners, do you have a recommendation for a banned book you really enjoyed reading? And I said maybe a book that is less popular, but as we've been talking about today, it's hard to find less popular banned books. Creative Rach said, The Passion by Jeanette Winterson. It is a magical realist novel set during the Napoleonic Wars. It follows Henry, a disillusioned French soldier, and Villanelle, a free-spirited Venetian woman, as they navigate themes of love, war, and identity. It explores constructions of gender and identity. Ooh. And then Bia Philippa said Mouse, Volumes 1 and 2. These graphic novels recount the Holocaust through the eyes of the author's father.
Mouse is incredible.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So listeners, how can you participate in this movement to raise awareness around books being banned? Because without us reporting these instances, there's going to be no record of this. Speaking of flying under the radar, there's probably many, many instances of books being quietly banned in ways we described earlier that go unreported. So it's really important work that the ALA is doing. You can, of course, report censorship. The ALA says that reporting censorship and challenges to materials, resources, and services is vital to defending library resources and to protect against challenges before they happen. You can actually go to ala.org, and they have a reporting tool. We'll include a link in the show notes. And you can also visit uniteagainstbookbans.org, and you can join their campaign to fight against censorship. This is an organization that the ALA also promotes. So that's it. That's what you can do. Of course, raise awareness and read these books. Read these banned books. Whenever you hear about one, read it. Read Genderqueer. Read The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I can't speak for Genderqueer, but Eric did. I assume it, like they said, it's a great book. And The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a great book and movie.
Yeah.
It is interesting how Perks, Twilight, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, banned. But then they get adapted to films, and people are just like, oh, I just
maybe harder
a lot
to
of
ban
these,
a film.
like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl also got adapted. Are You There, God It's Me, Margaret was just adapted a couple of years ago too. Yeah. So yeah, I think that I wonder if that's a concerted effort, to your point, to try and get more eyes on these stories.
Yeah. And it's interesting how parents don't really raise a fuss about these movies. They just don't take their kid to see the movie. Whereas I guess it's easier for a child to get a book without the parents' permission. So that's why they get more angsty about it.
That's true.
I'd like to see them try and ban podcasts.
Don't give them
Honestly,
any ideas.
I'm sure someone has tried.
I mean, there's like Apple parental controls. You can ban certain apps, but
yeah, like if
there's a will, there's a way.
Fortunately for us, there's an ever-growing amount of ways in which people can find community in the wider world.
And episodes of What the Hype Podcast. So just go to whatthehypepodcast.com for all the ways you can listen to the show.
Brilliant.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Don't forget to follow us in your favorite podcast and social media apps. Also, leave us a review and comment in those podcast apps or on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Let us know what your favorite banned books are. We love reading all of those comments, and we might read your comment on air. So that is the hype around banned books. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Bye.
We'll see you next time.